been preaching for, this will be 7, I think, weeks on this. Usually don't go that long on a series, but we've decided to drag this one out a little bit. We've been talking about excuses that we make for not doing what God's called us to do, or excuses that we make for God not blessing us. Those excuses really don't hold water. And that there is really no excuse that you can think of that God doesn't already know about. And yet He still wants to bless us. Come on, somebody. And He still wants to use us. And the first week I talked about maybe you feel like you're underqualified to be used by God. And that's understandable because, you know, when you look and you compare yourself to somebody like, you know, a Billy Graham or a, you know, or Oral Roberts, or, you know, somebody that's really changed the world or changed the nation, you could look at yourself and say, yeah, I'm underqualified to do that. But in our first week, we talked about how David was so underqualified to be king that his own father didn't even see it. And when the prophet came to his house to anoint the new king of Israel, his dad didn't even invite him. They left David out in the field to work. And so where you are right now has nothing to do with where God wants you to go in the future. And so you may be unqualified to fulfill your future, but you're not underqualified to take a step towards that future. Come on, somebody. And so that was our first week, that you are, as long as you have Jesus on the inside of you and you're in a relationship with Him, you are more than qualified to be used by God to do something. And so that was week 1. Week 2, we talked about your past being too bad. Oh, you don't know what I've done in my life. Listen, Paul called himself the chief of sinners, the least of the apostles. And I think there's even another place in there where he called himself like the least of Christians. And he was the guy that tried to stop the move of God, tried to stop the church from spreading. He tried his best to shut it down. And God reached in the middle of the worst guy in the history of the church and made him the greatest advocate for the church. And a guy that used to kill Christians is now getting people born again. And all of us sitting in this room right now are products of the worst sinner at one point's ministry. And listen, if God can do that for the worst sinner, what can He do in your life? Because there's nothing that you've done that's that bad. There is nothing that you've done that He can't forgive or won't forgive. And so your past isn't too bad. God can still use you. Week 3, we talked about people putting labels on us. And we talked about how we have, you know, I remember I showed you a picture of a mattress. And we had it had that tag on there that said, "Do not remove under penalty of law." And they had to go and rewrite that just a few years ago to say, "Except by the owner," because even owners were leaving it on there. Because they were afraid, like there was going to be mattress police coming to their house to look and make sure, is your tags in place? Because if not, we're going to have to haul you in. And so, and that's the thing, is we've had people put labels on us that we didn't have to leave there, but we have. And we've allowed what people thought about us and what people said about us to hold us in place. Jacob was born, his name meant liar. I mean, when you called somebody Jacob in Hebrew, that meant liar. So he came out of the womb labeled a liar and a trickster. And he went his whole life being that until God changed his name. Listen, it doesn't matter what somebody else labels you, what somebody else has said about you. God's got a different label in mind for you. And when you're born again, you are a child of God, you become somebody else because the label has changed. And so who cares what somebody else says about you? All right? Then we talked about week 4, nobody believes in my potential. And we talked about Jesus that week. Jesus, the Lord, had people that did not believe that He was really the Lord. There was a time when He went to go lay hands on the sick in his own hometown, and the Bible says they were so marveled at what He was doing, they were like, who does this guy think he is? He's just the carpenter's son. And the Bible says at that point, now this is Jesus we're talking about, He couldn't, not that He wouldn't, He couldn't do any mighty works because nobody believed in His potential. And we understand it. It's hard to be, when somebody doesn't believe that you can do something. When you feel like you want to do something in your life and somebody else goes, yeah, right. That's hard. And that's why we should surround ourselves with other people who think like us. That's why the early church, they would always use phrases like they went to their own company, because they would surround themselves with people who thought like them. And listen, you need to surround yourself, and you may need to pull away from some of your close friends and not give them access to speak into your life anymore. You can still be friends with them, but you know you don't need to have everybody. The people that don't believe in your potential, you don't need to have them in on the meetings where you're, or the times in your life where you're thinking about what you're going to do. Listen, God believes in your potential. That's why He sent Jesus to the earth. And so that's why He died and rose again, so that we can live up to the potential He has created us with. All right, week 5, I don't have the right connections. I'm not connected to the right people. I don't know anybody. We talked about Mephibosheth, who was the son of Jonathan, who was the son of King Saul. And when Saul and Jonathan died and David took over the throne, the common practice at that time was to kill all the rest of anybody that had anything to do with the former regime. When there was kingships changing in the Old Testament, they would kill everything, servants, children, anything that was tied to it. Usually they would burn the palace down, knock it down. They'd do everything and just rebuild all new. And David had made a pact with Jonathan that no matter what happens, if you get it and I don't, or I get it and you don't, we'll take care of each other's family. And so they made a promise, and one day David's sitting there surveying his kingdom, and he says, "Is there anybody left from Saul's house?" And they said, "Yeah, his grandson, Mephibosheth, and he's lame, can't walk." And so he went and got Mephibosheth and brought him to the palace and said, "You'll on, I'm going to give you everything your parents had, everything your grandparents had. I'm going to restore all the land to you, and you'll eat at my table like you're one of my sons from now on." And that's what happens. See, even though we may not know somebody out there, we're connected to the source. God knows us, and when we're connected to Him, He isn't just about restoring us just to have new birth and new life. Listen, that is important, and we're all going to heaven when we die because we know Jesus. But it's more than that. It was more than just restoring him to say, okay, you're a part of this kingdom again. He restored him everything that had been taken away from him and made him sit at the king's table. It was a full restoration and then some. Listen, you may not be connected to the right person yet, but you are connected to the right person right now. Amen? All right, and then last week, we talked about our resources not being enough, and we talked about how sometimes you look at what you have and you go, I don't know how that's going to happen and how that's going to work. And we talked about how faith doesn't always look at what you have. Faith has to look at what you're going to do. And you can't be moved by what you have. You have to be moved by what God's calling you to do. And you may look at your pocketbook or your checkbook and you may go, I don't know how I'm going to get there, but God, I'm committed. And my resources may not be enough right now. And I don't know how this is going to happen. But you know what? If I'm following after God and I'm going to go out there and make it happen anyway, God always provides. He always gets us there. It may not be in the way that we all think it's going to be. There's been many stories about food raining down from heaven and ravens bringing things. And it's all, oh man, wouldn't that be awesome to walk out in your backyard and there's Thanksgiving dinner. Just boom, 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 boom. You just walk out and pick it up. That'd be awesome, wouldn't it? You wouldn't have to go to the store and fight the crowds. Come on, anybody already sick of it? We're already sick of it, all right? It hadn't even really started yet. It'd be so great. That doesn't happen. And other times we just think that money's going to magically appear in the checkbook, and that doesn't happen, and we kind of get discouraged. But listen, all of a sudden, when you commit to something like this, God gives you an extra shift somewhere. Come on. God gives you an opportunity to do something. God gives you something. And what happens? The resources start coming in from somewhere. Sometimes they come in, people do, and it comes from someplace you never thought of. It doesn't matter what your resources are now, as long as you're committed to following the plan of God for your life. He's the one that's in charge of making the resources come in. All right, so this week, we're going to wrap this up, and we're going to talk about, but I'm insecure in myself. I'm insecure in myself. When it comes to living in the blessings of God or being used by God, we all have insecurities about ourselves that are obvious to us. We've tried to talk about several excuses that people in the Bible came up with over the last several weeks. These excuses were ones that we just talked about, but in this story, we're going to talk about excuses that are obvious enough to us that we just feel like everybody sees them. There's a story in the Old Testament of a guy named Moses. And for you, those that are regular here at the church, that are members here and come regularly, you know how I feel about Moses. Moses is one of those characters in the Bible. When you think Bible, you think Noah's Ark, you think David and Goliath, come on, and you think Moses. That's usually in that order. I mean, it's usually like that because Noah's Ark, everybody's putting it in their nurseries these days. And then, by the way, has anybody seen the trailer for the new Noah movie coming out? Whoa. Awesome. All right. Russell Crowe as Noah. Come on, how awesome is that? All right. That's almost as good, though. And then Richard Gere playing David. That's not bad. But nobody tops Charlton Heston playing Moses. You don't get better than that. Moses is such a great character that Charlton Heston plays him, and I know I talk about that till I'm blue in the face, but, and some of, like I said, you regulars are probably tired of hearing about it, but you folks that have never been with us before, I talk about Moses like all the time. I love the fact Charlton Heston played him. I love that. I usually do a cool imitation, stand still and see the salvation of the... So there it is. Now it's all complete, all right? It's one of those things, all right? At the end of the day, when it comes to looking at our insecurities, we are just like Moses. Moses was actually his own worst enemy when God called him. Moses was his own worst enemy. He almost talked himself, not God. You're not going to talk God out of something. But he almost talked himself out of not being used by God. And I want to say this to you. If you're taking notes, write this down. One of the greatest tricks that the enemy uses to sabotage our lives is to get us to believe that the people that God uses have reached a level of perfection that we have not. Yes, bam, exactly. That is a lie straight from hell. Listen to me. God does not use perfect people. You know why? Because they do not exist. And you can throw out there. Name your favorite Christian hero. They are not, nor were they, nor will they ever be perfect. They just aren't. I had the distinct honor of serving at a large ministry, and I worked for Kenneth Hagin for 11 years. Now that is when Kenneth Hagin Sr. was alive, that was, one of the leading prophets in this country. Seriously, governors would call him. President Bush Sr. called him. People wanted to know what this man thought. Okay? He was a great man of God. All right? And yet, he wasn't perfect. Now, I know if any of my Rhema folks are watching right now, they're probably ready to throw a rock at me through the camera. But he wasn't. Wasn't perfect. I worked for his son for 11 years. Pastor isn't perfect. Okay? I have got, because of that position, I got to know several large ministers, and guess what? They're not perfect. I've seen them lose it on their staff and then have to come back and apologize. Perfect people don't have to apologize because they don't do anything wrong. But those people don't exist. We see other people that God uses, and we think that they somehow have got it all together, that they do not struggle with like we do and have no problems. These great leaders are inside some kind of plastic protection from problems and issues that we face regularly, and we're all kind of going, how do I get there? Listen, I've been in ministry now for 21 years. And I have people think certain things about me right off the bat. I don't always get how do you not deal with the problems? I usually get, wow, you're really tall. And wow, you're really over-intimidating. And when I used to weigh 305 pounds, it was, wow, you're really big. I got that all the time. And people hear me talk, and then they go, whoa, your voice is like, whoa, don't yell at me. And I'm like, I'm not yelling. What are you talking about? People get an instant thing when they meet people. You get an instant idea of what it's like. And this is what happens when we've been around people that we think are so great in ministry. We kind of have this instantaneous switch gets flipped. This is how it is. But listen to me. As bad as it is to judge somebody based on things that we assume about them at their first appearance, it's just as bad to assume that they got it all together. Here's why it's bad, because you're putting them up on a pedestal and you're allowing yourself to be disappointed when they do fall, and they always fall. They may not fall down into the gutter, but their expectations that you've put on them aren't always met. And this is what happened with Moses. All right? Moses was adopted by Pharaoh's daughter, raised in the palace, and had a silver spoon in his mouth. All right? Now, he was adopted and adopted into the royal family, and here he is living the dream. I mean, seriously. I mean, if you're going to get adopted, who better to adopt you than the royal family? Okay? When everybody else that you're related to and everybody else that you know is building the pyramids, getting beat by taskmasters and things like that, and are slaves, you're living in the palace. And you have servants. And it's happening for you. All right? But that didn't fix everything for Moses. Moses still had issues. Come on. He went and killed an Egyptian. Why? Because his temper, even though he had a great upbringing, he still had a temper. What's that? It's a flaw. All right? He kills this guy and then becomes Dr. Richard Kimball. Now, some of you are going, who's that? The Fugitive. Anybody see that movie with Harrison Ford? He goes on the run. This is what Moses does. Moses then leaves Egypt, fleeing for his life. Because he knows they're going to kill him. So he runs, and for 40 years lives on the backside of the desert by himself. Now, if you didn't grow up in Sunday school, this may be an unfamiliar story to you. Rent the 10 Commandments. It'll change your life. All right, so I'm just trying to bring everybody up to speed. All right? And as he's out there on the backside of the desert, and if you have your Bibles, go ahead and open those to Exodus chapter 3. Exodus chapter 3. As he is running for his life and hiding, God appears to him and calls him. And this is where we see Moses' insecurities start to surface. Listen, you got insecurities in your life? I'm sure you do. There are things that you think are obvious, that you're so self-conscious of. We're going to get to those here in just a minute. Exodus chapter 3, verse number 7. Then the Lord told him, I have certainly seen the oppression of my people in Egypt. I have heard their cries of distress because of their harsh slave drivers. Yes, I am aware of their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the power of the Egyptians and lead them out of Egypt into their own fertile and spacious land. It is a land flowing with milk and honey, the land where the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites now live. Look, the cry of the people of Israel has reached me, and I have seen how harshly the Egyptians abuse them. Now go, for I am sending you to Pharaoh. You must lead my people Israel out of Egypt. Now that's a pretty heavy call right there. But look what Moses does. Moses does like many do. But Moses protested to God. Who am I to appear before Pharaoh? Who am I to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt? God answered, I will be with you. And this is your sign that I am the one who has sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God at this very mountain. Now, in this story, we're going to look at three things that Moses was insecure about. Now, for not 1 second am I saying that we're covering these three things. What I want everybody to focus on today is the fact of Moses had insecurities. Now, we're going to talk about his three insecurities, but these may not be your insecurities. You may have your own insecurities. You may feel like you're overweight. You may feel like you have scars, or you may feel like you have a zit on your forehead the size of Mount Everest, or whatever. You may feel whatever insecurities you have, they are going to probably be different than Moses's. But you probably still have them. All right? Moses had three. And that's what we're going to talk about this morning. Number one, Moses felt that he lacked credibility. Credibility actually is the meaning of that. It means this: believability, and the reason to be accepted is truth. Now, Moses was saying that if someone asked him why they should listen to him, he couldn't give them a reason. I don't know why they're going to want to listen to me. Why? God, why? Why would, if I show up down there and say, let my people go, why are they going to believe me? He was an Israelite that was not raised in slavery. He was a spoiled rich kid who lived in the palace. Lack of credibility. If he's going to walk into the Egyptian or the Israelite camp and be like, hey, I'm here to set you free, and they're going to be like, yeah, okay, rich boy, you're going to pay our way out of here? What's it going to, what do you have to do with us? They don't know. Why would they believe me? And not to mention, he killed somebody, so now he's wanted. So he's a criminal. Why am I going to follow you? I should turn you in for the reward. Exodus chapter 3 again, verse number 13. But Moses protested, if I go to the people of Israel and tell them the God of your ancestors has sent me, they will ask me, what is his name? Now look what he says right here. Then what should I tell them? If you got your Bible there, underline that. What should I tell them? Moses is questioning God here. What am I supposed to say? What can you tell me that's going to give me credibility to prove what I'm saying? God replied to Moses, I am who I am. And I just can't help it. I got to say it that way every time I read that. I just hear God's voice say, I am who I am. You can't help it. Right? I have this idea in my head that God's voice sounds a little bit of a hybrid between Darth Vader and Barry White. It's kind of something like that. I think that's what God sounds like, all right? Then God says, say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, say this to the people of Israel, Yahweh, the God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. God tells Moses that his credibility had nothing to do with the way he was raised or the fact that he's a fugitive. It had everything to do, come on somebody, with who God is. And he didn't go and say, well, why would they listen to me? It's not like he went, well, because Moses, I created you to be a good speaker, and you have good people skills, and well, I'm just going to anoint you, and you're just called to do this, and that's the only reason. No, he was like, because I'm behind you, I am with you, and I am who I am. Listen, your credibility, and if there's things that you're thinking, well, why would anybody want to listen to me? If that's what you're thinking, listen, you don't have to worry about that because the God that created the universe is the one standing behind you. Now, have you ever felt a lack of credibility? I don't have enough experience, maybe. I don't have the upbringing or the expertise like somebody else does. I can't do it as good as them. I've heard this one a lot. I'm only a baby Christian. Really know a lot about the Word. I've heard that said to me, and I just go, that has nothing to do with it. I've heard people say, I've made mistakes. I did that wrong. I don't have the money or the credit to make that happen. I don't have the patience. I've heard them, and they just keep coming. Things that people are insecure about. Listen to me. God is all the credibility that we need. He is the great I am. And this word I am, some of you have heard this before. In Hebrews chapter 11, when it says, he that comes to God must believe that he is, those are the same. I am and he is, those are the same. What does that mean? It doesn't mean God was saying, I am, as in I exist, and that's kind of what we all think when we read that scripture in Hebrews, must believe that he is like he exists. It's more than that. It's more than him just existing or being real. It's the fact that he is, or I am, what? Well, what do you need me to be? What do you need me to be, Moses, to back up what you're doing? Do you need me to be one of the 10 plagues? Guess what? I am. Come on, do you need me to turn your serpent, your rod into a serpent? Come on, we're going to get to that in a second. But I am that. You need me to give you some boldness and kind of come on you like a coat so you feel bold? I am that. I mean, Moses, he's just telling him, I am your credibility. Now listen, I've been in the ministry 21 years, and 20 of those years I was a youth pastor. And youth pastors, we just kind of all are looked at as like giant goofballs. Now, I've been a pastor now for over a year, and I still get it. People look at what I'm saying like an old youth pastor. People look at what I'm doing like, I talk to some people back at Rhema, and they still talk to me like they're just like waiting on me to do a fart joke or something. I mean, it's like, what are you doing? What's going on? And I'm like, oh, we're pastoring a church, loving people, and they're like, and? You know what I mean? It's like they're just waiting, because I have 20 years, that's the way I was, I was a youth pastor. But while I was working at Rhema, I would go visit people in the hospital. Every Tuesday was my day to go to the hospital. And I mean, when you have a church of 5,000 to 7,000 people, you're going to the hospital quite often. And so we would go every Tuesday, see 6 or 8 people, and go in and pray for them and visit with them. But more often than not, when I would walk in the door to see them, this is the response I got. Like if they're on the phone or something, they're sitting there in their bed, this is the response I got. The youth pastor just walked in. I'll have to call you back. And then there was this, what are you doing here? Now, you're just the youth pastor, right? And I mean, any confidence I had walking in that door that I'm going to pray for them and raise them out of that bed, just boom, out the door, gone. And I remember the first time they asked me to preach an adult service at Rhema, I was like, what am I going to say that these 6,000 people haven't heard Brother Hagin say 10,000 times? Or Brother Copeland, or whoever they would have in there. I mean, they had the biggest of the big coming through. What am I going to say that they? And it just so happened that the first month I'm supposed to preach in front of the whole church, the topic that they were telling the associates to preach on that month was faith. Now, if you don't know anything about Brother Hagin, that's what his whole ministry was built on. We had a faith shield on top of the church that spun around like this, so everybody knew what we preached there. Okay. What am I going to say? Yeah, faith is the substance of things hoped for. You ever heard that? I mean, and I'm serious. I'm like, what am I going to say? And it took me a long time to settle in my heart that, you know what? I have the King of the universe living on the inside of me. And I don't care if somebody's heard it 1,000,000 times. I have something that they need, because they never get enough of God. They never get enough of God. All right? I have come face to face with this fact that it is what is on the inside of me that changes people, not who I am. I am not what it takes to get somebody's life changed. I'm just a vessel that holds that. All right? My resume and my skills are not what determines if I have the credibility. My God does. Amen? Maybe you struggle with these feelings of inferiority. Some area of your life that you just don't feel like, if you said it to somebody, they'd be like, okay, whatever. Listen, stop relying on yourself here. Some of you are trying to witness to your families, and your families are laughing at you, and you just go, I don't even know why I keep trying. Listen, stop relying on you and start relying on the great I am. It is Him is the one who changes them. It's not you. And if you don't have the credibility to get Him, He does. You just keep throwing it out there. You keep praying for them. You keep ministering to them. Some of you are trying to get people at your job saved or trying to get people to notice God, and they just kind of call you a kook and just go, whatever. Listen, it's not you anyway. You just keep bringing the Holy Spirit to work with you. Because the great I am is the one who's supposed to change them, not you. It's not about you. Listen, if you think it's about you just being like, oh, I'm going to sacrifice myself for God. I'm going to sacrifice my reputation, let people talk bad about me and all this stuff. I don't care. I'm just going to keep doing it. That's pride and arrogance right there. And it's not about you anyway. It never was. We are supposed to step out and give somebody Jesus. And if they don't take him, that's on them. If they don't change because of the leading of the Holy Spirit, that's on them. You are still doing it. You're doing and walking in obedience. And listen, if Moses would have said, I can't go because nobody's going to listen to me, would Israel still be in captivity? Maybe. We don't know. But God told him, it's not about you, it's about me. All right? The next thing he said was, he was convinced that there was a lack of evidence. In Exodus chapter 4, verse number 1, Moses protested again. What if they won't believe me or listen to me? What if they say, the Lord never appeared to you? That sounds like something that we've all, had experiences in our own life. They may not have said the Lord hasn't appeared to you, but when you start talking to people in your life that know you and you talk about how Jesus has changed your life, and they kind of go, yeah, okay. You're still the same old person I used to know, right? What evidence is there? You're still the same guy. You still look exactly the same. Tyler, you're still skinny and flexible and can bend in crazy ways. And y'all don't know. Tyler's like a contortionist sometimes. He sits up here on the front row, and I don't know how he does it. You look exactly the same, Tyler. There's no evidence that you've changed. This is what they're saying. This is what Moses is afraid of. What evidence do I have? What can I bring to the table, God, that's going to make people know? Sure, God, I can tell them that. What if they look at me and say, no, I don't believe you? Moses was worried that he wasn't going to be able to prove God sent him. Now listen to me. There are a lot of people out there right now who are trying to prove that God exists. If God wanted to prove himself exists, he would just appear. And I said this last week, and I'll say it again because it bears repetition. Listen, it's not about what you know. And if he appeared right now, we'd all know God's real. But that's not what he's called our relationship with him to be. Our relationship is called to be a relationship of faith, which means it's believing, without seeing it. It's believing it without putting my hands on it. It's believing it without any of my other senses except for hearing. I need to hear God's real. I need to hear what God's word says, and that's it. Now it's up to me to make that decision. If God proves it to me, now it's based on what I know. And God's not interested in what you know, because he knows more than you anyway. All right? Listen to me, no matter how excellent we do something, no matter how awesomely you are good at doing it, you do not possess the ability to prove the creator of the universe. You don't have the ability to back him up. You don't. You can be as good at something. Listen, you could be what the world considers the best at, and that is not something that's going to back up God. You know why? I don't need no backup. Okay? Now listen, let's look at it just a little bit different direction here. The disciples were very similar. Okay? The disciples were average, everyday Joes. Now I'm going to teach you a little history lesson here for a second, all right? Let me tell you how the Jewish culture worked. Back in the Old Testament times, and they still sort of do this, but back in the Old Testament times, every Jewish little boy was born with the potential to become a priest. Okay? In fact, they were all looked at. All the little boys, inspection, the rabbis would come by and they would all look at them and they're all inspected. And then they all start learning at age 3 the Torah. And by age 5, they're supposed to have the first 5 books of the Old Testament memorized. Word for word. Now listen, I have a 6-year-old, and it's like pulling teeth to get him to do a memory verse. We go to Christian school. And he has to do a memory verse every week. And it's like, come on. say it again. And by the time it says it again, it's like 5-7 words are wrong, and he just kind of is making it up as he's going along at that point. I can't imagine teaching him the whole the whole Old Testament, first 5 books, the books of Moses. He has to have memorized front to back, especially when you think about numbers. Really? I have to memorize the family tree? I don't care about great-grandfather 10 times. I don't care. Or my cousin over there and their 10. I don't care. But here we go, 5 years old. And then at 5 years old, they test them. And if at 5 years old, the ones that still did it, they move on. And then at 5 years old, if they don't, which I would think you would just fail on purpose, like, I don't have to do this anymore, But they just said, you're done. You're done. So 5 years old, they're now relegated to go and be something else. Tax collector, fisherman. Oh, this sounds familiar. These guys are starting to turn into those kind of guys. All right? So then they're tested again, I think at 13 at their bat mitzvah. And then again at 18. And I'm not sure what the testing is at that time, but at 18, if they pass the test, now catch this, watch this now. They actually are chosen by their local priest where they live, and there was plenty of them around, and a priest would choose them, and they would make them their student. And as they're a student there, then they here's what they do. They put their, and this is what they call it, the student takes on the yoke, now watch this, the yoke of that priest. And for the next several years, they follow him everywhere. They go everywhere. Basically become armor bearer. If there's churches that have that today, that's what these guys become. They become the apprentice. They become whatever. They're being poured into by this priest, and he's teaching them everything. Now I want you to just for a second think about the disciples. We have a tax collector and fisherman, and we have other tradesmen. We're not real sure what all of them were, but we know none of them are priests. Which means what? They didn't make the cut. So they're a bunch of nobodies, really. I mean, because really in the Jewish culture, in those days, the priests were the ones. I mean, you just stood by. They were the ones. They were the ones that changed and shaped the culture. They were the ones that influenced people. They were the ones. Now we got 12 ragtag guys that did not make the cut. And what does Jesus say to them? He speaks their language. Now watch this. He walks up to him and he says, take my, what was the next word? He said, yoke upon you. What's he saying? And learn of me. Man, that makes sense now, doesn't it? Doesn't that make a whole lot more sense? We always think it's got to be the heavy load. Listen, Jesus is just saying, follow me around. You're going to be my student. That's what he's saying to these guys. And they're going, hey, that's what we've always wanted to hear. And so they start following him around. All right? There's no evidence that they're any different. There's no evidence that they're anything special. They're not got the stamp of approval from the temple. They don't have the stamp of approval from the priest. They don't have the diploma. They don't have the certification. They actually are following a radical guy who wasn't a priest either. I mean, now Jesus was pretty smart. I mean, he's sitting there at 12 years old discussing things. He probably, I wonder if he failed on purpose. Like, if he's like, I'm not going to fool with that, I mean, because he's not. At 30, he's working in a carpentry shop. So I'm kind of wondering what he did there. Why didn't he pass? But he didn't. All right? And so they're following Jesus around. All right? And there is no evidence that they're anything. And Jesus gives them a call, much like Moses receives. Mark chapter 16, verse number 15. And he told them, go into all the world and preach the good news to everyone. Anyone who believes and is baptized will be saved, but anyone who refuses to believe will be condemned. These miraculous signs will accompany those who believe. They will cast out demons in my name. They'll speak with new languages. They will be able to handle snakes with safety, and if they drink any deadly poison, it won't hurt them. They will be able to place their hands on the sick, and they will be healed. Now, this comes at the end of 3 years. And all they had was what Jesus was saying to them, his word to them. That's all they have. There is no, it's not like Jesus had the ministry that he's got right now that we all kind of recognize it and we've all established our own certification thing within the body of Christ. People go to Bible school now and get diplomas and that happens. This is not them. This is all they have is Jesus' word telling them, if you go out, you're going to be able to do this. That's it. That's all they have. Verse 19. When the Lord Jesus had finished talking with them, he was taken up into heaven and sat down in the place of honor at God's right hand. Now check this out. And the disciples went everywhere and preached. Now watch that next word say. And the Lord. Come on now. You need to catch this. And the Lord worked. What's that next word there? Underline that. Put a big circle around it. Highlight it. Worked through them. It wasn't about who they were. It was about who he is. Worked through them, confirming. Now catch that. This next word is what they. Come on now. What they. If you got your Bible, circle that one, underline it, highlight it real big. Confirming what they said. Y'all not catching that. Confirming what they said. I want to make sure you get that. What they said. By many miraculous signs. No evidence at all that they're anything special. No evidence that they are anybody why would you want to come pray for me? You're not the angel that stirs the water. Why are you going to pray for me? I don't care. Get away from me. I mean, you're just that guy that's following Jesus around. Who cares about you? You're crazy. You're flaky. You're radical. I don't know about that. And the Lord confirmed through what they said. Now watch this. We're going somewhere. I want to say this before we get there. Evidence is not a faith builder. Evidence is a knowledge builder. Okay? And Moses wanted to make sure people knew that he was sent. It wasn't about, I want them to believe it. He wanted them to know it. And again, it's not about what you know. All right? So, let's go back to Moses for a second, and we're going to come back to the disciples. Okay? I know we're jumping around a little bit today, but this is all going to make sense in just a second. All right? All right? Exodus chapter 4, verse number 2, then the Lord asked him, because Moses is asking for evidence. Okay? What is in your hand? A shepherd's staff, Moses replied. Throw it down on the ground, the Lord told him. So Moses threw down the staff, and it turned into a snake. Moses jumped back. Had a James Brown moment. Jump back. Then the Lord told him, reach out and grab its tail. So Moses reached out and grabbed it, and it turned back into a shepherd's staff in his hand. Now catch this. Perform this sign. Underline that. Perform this sign, the Lord told him. Then they will believe that the Lord, the God of their ancestors, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, really has appeared to you. God gave evidence to Moses by using what was in Moses' hand, and that gave him the ability to prove that God was with him anywhere, anytime, any place. Perform this sign. What did he say? Anybody wants to know if you're sent by God, throw your stick down on the ground, it'll turn into a snake, and they'll know that I'm with you. So anytime, Moses carried that staff with him everywhere he went. Why? Because he's been herding sheep out in the wilderness. That's what he does. Okay, so he's got it with him all the time. All right? God is actually capable of doing the same thing in all of us. But here's where it's different. We're under a new covenant with God. We're under a new agreement. And so we don't have to have something that we carry around on the outside. Okay? God can come and live inside each of us through an acceptance of Jesus Christ. And when we enter into a relationship with Him, we now have a relationship with Him and with His Word. Now, I know this is, trust me, we're going to wrap this whole thing together. Watch this, all right? Colossians chapter 1, verse 27 says, Christ lives in you. This gives you assurance of sharing His glory. If you grew up in Sunday school, you probably heard it said this way: Christ in you, the hope of glory. All right? We now put ourselves, let's go back to the disciples for a second. Now, Moses asked for evidence. He's got external evidence that he carries around with him. Now, let's go back to the disciples for a second. All right? We now become like the disciples, though. Okay? We're being called to live with Jesus by taking his yoke upon him, follow him around, learn about him. Okay? All right? The evidence that we have, though, is different because it's now God's words that go and live inside us. Psalm chapter 119, verse 11, I have hidden your word in my heart that I might not sin against you. All right? We aren't like Moses where the evidence is on the outside. Our evidence lives in us. Jesus, Colossians 1:27, he lives in us. And it operates in us, the word, Psalm 119. Okay, our evidence lives in us and operates us and changes us, just like it changes us, just like it did Moses' staff. Do you see where this is going yet? All right, we have the power living in us, the word living in us, and it now changes us, so we're now like the staff. All right? So you better catch this, we become the evidence. Oh, somebody better catch that. We become the evidence. So you may be asking God, I need something to prove it. You're it. Mark chapter 16, verse 20, and the disciples went everywhere and preached, and the Lord worked, come on, through a staff? Come on, through a lightning bolt? What does it say there? And the Lord worked through, come on, somebody better catch that. Worked through them, confirming what, remember I said to pay attention to that, confirming what they what? Come on now, confirming what they, don't get weak on me, said. So if we're the evidence, that means what? We should be saying something. Y'all better catch this now. We need to be saying something. Well, what credibility do I have? You have him. What evidence do I have? You're the evidence. Now, what is evidence if it's not shown? And how do we show it? By what we, come on somebody, say. What are we supposed to say? Well, listen to me. Inside each of us is the story or experience, come on, of what God has already done for us. You all have a story. Listen, we could take all day and pass the microphone around and say, you're not leaving this room until you tell me one thing God's done for you. And it may be, I got saved 3 weeks ago. Praise God, you got a testimony. You got something to say. And listen, you have to get to the point where you are determined, I believe that is the evidence somebody else needs. It's God that saved you. Listen, that's enough. It's God that heals you. When you say that to somebody else, that's enough. You're the evidence. Does God heal today? Yes. How do we know? Well, I was diagnosed with this and I don't have it anymore. Well, God's never done anything like that for me. Have you ever cut your finger and it healed back closed? You know why He did that? Because God designed our bodies to heal themselves. That's a testimony right there. Come on, somebody. I was laying in bed the other day and I was sick as a dog and I just started praying, Lord, I got to have a touch. And I thank you that your word, it heals me. And the next day I got up, fever was broke, all gone. I got up, washed all that sick sweat off of me. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Don't act like you don't. The sick sweat, y'all know what I'm talking about? I washed all that off and I feel like a new man. Listen, that's enough. Oh man, I didn't know how we were going to pay our bills this month, and I got down on my knees and I said, God, we have $5 and we owe $200. I don't know what. And all of a sudden, my job called me and said, hey, listen, we got a check here. We don't know what it's for. It just came. Listen, if that happened for you, that's enough for you to tell that to somebody else, and that's all the evidence you need. Your story is the evidence. What has God done in you? When you look back over your life, where has He brought you from? Where has he led you to? That's enough. What has he healed you from? What need did he meet? How did he change the course of your day to take you from being in a bad mood to a good mood? Come on, I could go on and on all day. Listen, God makes us the evidence. Listen, you can sit there and think, oh, I am insecure about these things. Listen, we all got insecurities. And I was going to show a clip, and I don't know, is it ready or no? Okay, I was going to show a clip, but and don't anybody, just go ahead and put your rocks down. All right, listen, I thought the Austin Power movies were hilarious. I'm sorry if that offends you. But there's this one scene where they bring the mole in that's infiltrated Dr. Evil's lair. And it's Fred Savage when he was, we all watched Fred Savage on the Wonder Years growing up. And he comes in and he's got this big giant mole on his lip right here. I mean, it's like huge. Is it ready? Oh, good. Let's watch it.
Dr. Evil's organization.
Excellent, Basil. We've been trying for years to get a mole inside Dr. Evil's lair. We now have that mole.
Yes. Ah, and here he is.
So you're the...
Most excellent agent we've ever seen.
Yes, most excellent agent we've ever seen. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, I wasn't able to get an exact location, but I did learn that Dr. Evil has moved to a new lair outside of Tokyo, Japan. By the way, I realized that I have a large mole on my face. Where? What? Where's that mole? I didn't see one. I also realized the irony that I am my... Mole. Mole.
Oh, shut up! Mole, 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 mole. The good news is...
All right. So listen. We all have insecurities like that. All right. I'm going to touch on this one real quick. I know we're really short on time, but just give me 5 minutes, okay? Listen. Moses stuttered, and he had a personal flaw in his life, and I don't remember Charlton Heston playing him that way, but evidently he had a stuttering problem because he says, "But Lord, I'm slow of speech." And I'm sure he felt like that, like he's going to get in front of Pharaoh, and Pharaoh's going to look at him and be like, "What are you saying, Moses?" He's very self-conscious of his personal flaws, and we all have them. We all have them. I used to weigh 375 pounds. Praise God I don't anymore. But you know what? I have some loose skin. You stretch it out like that, and it's, surgery is going to have to fix that one day. Amen. With my hair plugs. Oh, wait. That's another self-conscious thing. I got a little... The Lord kind of speaks to me sometimes and be like, turn around, look in the mirror. You think you look so good. No, we all have them. We all have things that we're self-conscious of. And Moses is convinced that his is going to stop the move of God from happening. And I'm going to make this short as I can, and I'm going to say this. Listen, God knows what your personal flaws are. And he is not, your personal flaws do not set you up to fail. It's actually the strongest point of anointing that you can receive. Now, some of you looked at me funny when I said that. All right? 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse number 7. And lest I should be exalted above measure by the abundance of the revelations, a thorn in the flesh was given to me, a messenger of Satan to buffet me. Lest is made perfect, come on, in weakness. Therefore, most gladly I would rather boast in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Therefore I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in needs, in persecutions, in distress for Christ's sake. Come on now, underline it, circle it, put it in red, white, and blue. For when I am weak, then I am strong. I heard somebody say one time, I got to find it, the thing that you are the most self-conscious of, or weakest in, that's what it is. The thing that you are the weakest in is the area of strongest anointing. Why? Because where you're weakest is where you need him the most. And that's why he says, when you're weak, I'm there to make you strong. And I thought it was so funny because as soon as Moses said, I stutter, God turns around and says to him, who made your mouth, son? Who made your tongue? Don't worry about it. Listen, you have personal flaws, I'm sure. Man, I got a temper. I'm overly competitive. I mean, I just lose it sometimes and I have to go back and repent. Okay, God knows that. And he still wants to use you. Come on, yeah, well, you know, I've got loose skin when I take my shirt off at the beach. So? Nobody cares. God can still use me. How do you know that? I'm pastor in a church. My loose skin has nothing to do with that. What do you have in your life that you're self-conscious of that's a personal flaw? Because God doesn't care about it. God wants to use you in spite of it. He wants to anoint that part of your life and raise you up so that he can use you in there. I'm insecure. I don't know. You don't need to know. You need to believe.